Are sequels destined to fail? Salutations! Welcome to Loving the Language of Literacy. My name is Sophia Lee, and today I'll be addressing that very question. Before I start the video itself, I am so freaking excited because this is a collab with my best bookish friend ever, Alex at The Books Buzz. We've been planning this for way too long because I just couldn't get my act together and I've been procrastinating a lot. But the point is, she's doing a video addressing the exact same thing. Her opinion varies slightly from mine, and it's always nice to see both sides of the story. So go and check her video out, give it a big thumbs up and comment because I know she'd appreciate it so much. As members of the bookish community, obviously we read books, whether we're booktubers, bloggers, bookstagrammers, or just plain old readers themselves. And most commonly, unless you're reading just all nonfiction, books have sequels. This happens a lot in fantasy novels as well as contemporary and just everything in between, obviously. Anything can have a sequel. The thing about a sequel, it is a completely different book. Yes, it may be a continuation of the story, or maybe it won't be. Companion novels. Point is, they're separate books, and that comes with a lot of baggage for both authors as well as the readers themselves. It's not that simple. It's kind of like an on and off relationship where no matter what happens, no matter what stage you are in, you still have a history. And yes, I know I just compared book reading to being in a relationship, but whatever. We're just gonna go with it. The first concern to bring up in this sequel discussion is expectations. We all have them no matter what, and they can make or break our reading experience. For example, if you're a huge fan and this is your most anticipated book of the year, the author obviously wants to write a good novel to sell books and, you know, make a living, as well as have his or her own reader's enjoyment. But the reader has so much pressure on them, like, do I read this on one sitting? Do I space it out? Do I try to savor it? What do I do to enhance my reading experience? Then there's the case where there might be a lot of hype and pre-publication buzz going into it. It's exploded across the booktube community or the blogosphere. You feel a lot of pressure. What if I don't like this book as much as my friends? What if I'm just the outlier and nobody understands the feelings? Which of course won't happen because this is booktube and the whole bookish community, and you'll find someone who thinks the same way as you. Point is, it is a risk. The second factor in this discussion is time. The gap between the time you've read the first book and the second, or whether you're on the 6th to the 7th. Whatever the case is, it's from one book to another. Especially if this is a last book in the series. And of course, there is so much pressure for those, and that could take up a whole other video. But today we're mostly focusing on the second middle books in the series. Something that could make or break your reading experience, which is completely personal to you as a reader, and it might not matter either, is if you have binge read this series or if you're reading them over a space of a couple of years. I know so many people in this community grew up with Harry Potter. I myself grew up with Percy Jackson, and every year around, you know, October, fall seasons, a new book would come out, and it was always the highlight of my year. I'd be waiting for so long because obviously the author would be so mean to us and give us a cliffhanger, and then we would have to wait an entire year for the next book. Whereas sometimes when an entire series is released, and I know a lot of readers do this for a number of reasons, including just keeping the story straight in your head, being enveloped in the world, and experiencing it all, is binge reading. And that is obviously, if you don't know, when you read all the books in the series, one right after another. I've done this before with a couple of series, and I've both regretted as well as enjoyed the decision. It really is up to the book itself. What I did with the Girl of Fire and Thorns trilogy was I started the first book. I didn't have the second and third. What I did immediately after I started reading Girl of Fire and Thorns, I put the next two books on hold. I waited a day in between finishing Girl of Fire and Thorns to read Crown of Embers, and I just sped through that one and The Bitter Kingdom. That is just one example of what could happen when you're binge reading a series. There's actually another thing that could happen, which is not as common, I think, in the bookish community, but you know, it could happen, is that you want to space the books apart and soak it in, even if all of them are released. Let's say they're really heavy and you know that it'll be too much to just read all at once. And sometimes you just want to break, read some fluffy contemporaries in between, and you're good to go. A quick note about time. Let's say you're reading a trilogy and you get your hands on the first two books immediately. They're released, you binge read them, you have a great time, but then you're left with the dilemma of not being able to get your hands on the third. Whether it is because it's not released yet, or just because your library takes forever on their hold system and you can't get it in time. In that case, I find it extremely problematic because you may fall prey to spoilers, either consciously or unconsciously, whether you're just innocently scrolling through Tumblr or Twitter, or whether you're like me and you spoil Ignite Me because you couldn't help it and you just watched everyone's book talks. I'm very ashamed on that fact. Let's talk now about the kinds of sequels. Number one, the masterpiece. The piece of media which cannot be topped no matter what happens. I don't actually have any bookish examples for this one, but I do have two movie ones, and that is Nemo and The Incredibles, because I personally think they should not have sequels, and that so many of these Disney franchises just keep on churning them out when they were perfectly happy with just one. Type number two, The Holdout. These are the kind of books where they're around a 3.5 rating, where you aren't in love with them, but you don't hate them, and you feel like you just want to continue the series, waiting and maybe hoping for something better. I've had this happen with both the Madman's Daughter and Mara Dyer trilogy, where I just kept reading the novels as they came out and were released, but I wasn't in love with them, and I really didn't have any reason besides just wanting to see if it would get better. Little news flash, in my own personal opinion, neither of those trilogies got better. Bonus addition to this type of sequel are the kind that leave you with cliffhangers, where you've read the entire novel, you're gonna give it 2 stars, and then something, and I mean something, huge plot twist happens at the end of this book, and you need to read the next one, even if you know you're gonna hate it. I've had this happen to me with Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson, Defy by Sarah B. Larson, as well as All Fall Down by Ellie Carter, where I'm just dying the whole novel. And then the last 50, maybe even the last 20 pages completely blows my mind, changes everything, and frustrates the heck out of me as a reader. Sequel number 3, The Flip Side. This has happened to me only on a few occasions, most of them negative actually, where I read the sequel and it feels like a completely different story. For some reason, even though we're in the same world, it feels like the writing style, the tone, the mood, everything that's involved in the art of storytelling has completely changed, and it really, pisses me off when this happens. This first book makes my opinion of the author extremely high. I respect them, I love them, and of course because it's a sequel, I want to read more. Sadly, when I did read the sequels to these novels, I felt like the story was dragging, maybe like there shouldn't have been a sequel at all, even though there was room for it. It's a slippery slope when you feel like it's completely changed, and you keep, of course, holding out for more until you realize that no, the author has changed for some mysterious reason that maybe you can't even pinpoint, and you're very, very sad. Sequel number 4, The Improvement. This happens most commonly in high fantasy and any kind of story where there is a lot of world building. And this also happens a lot with debut authors, and of course by the time they have their sequels out, they're not debut authors anymore. It's hard for me to hold out, but the few times I have, my waiting has paid off. I haven't personally read The Moral Instruments yet, but I've heard this so much with readers of Cassandra Clare, is that it takes so long for this entire world to be established and put down, but once you get all that out of the way, you get to come to the meat of the action and the climaxes and the plot twists, and where everything has suddenly fallen together and the characters are finally realizing their full potential. This has happened in some of the most popular series of all time, such as Harry Potter, Throne of Glass, Percy Jackson, and the Lunar Chronicles, where maybe books 1 and 2 were just okay, maybe you liked them, but then when you get to the end of the series and you see how everything has panned out and come together, you are like, yes! I don't know what I just did, but you get the point. Sequel number 5, The Dragout. This happens most commonly in sequels where there are just so many books. Come to the most common collective opinion of a series that was dragged out way too much, and they're dragging it out even more. And I know you can guess this, and that is the Selection Trilogy by Kiara Cass. A lot of people think that the first book, The Selection, could have just been one book, and I completely agree. It would have been a fantastic, quick, fun, reality TV in a book form read. But it was made into 3 books where nothing happened in the second one. By the third, America Singer could not make up her mind. And then we have to go ahead and have 2 other books set in the same world following her stupid daughter that annoyed the heck out of me. I know I'm getting really emotional, but just, if you've read The Selection, please just raise your hand in the comments and tell me, because I can't take it anymore. Speaking of the air, it is my perfect segue into the bonus round of sequels, and that is the dreaded, but sometimes appreciated, really uneven ground on this one, and that is the companion novel. There are the three most common companion novel types that I found in my reading career, and they most commonly happen in contemporary romance and new adult fiction. Companion novel number 1, when it focuses on a different character but they're in the same exact world and or town. This happens so much in new adult with authors like Cora Carmack and Jennifer L. Armentrout, and sometimes it's good because you like the second character or whatever other character's being focused on better than the first, or maybe they were one of those cool sidekicks that were in the main character story but never got featured, and you're happy they're finally getting a book of their own. Other times you just feel like it's complete overkill and it's like, I don't want to know this random girl who I barely cared about in the first place is best friend's story. Like, just why? Example number 2, when it's set in the same world but a completely different time, situation, and story. The most common example for this one is obviously the Infernal Devices versus the Mortal Instruments, because yes, I know City of Heavenly Fire wraps everything up and connects the two, but besides that, it's still a completely different time period. Companion novel number 3, when it's the same exact story told by a different character. Colleen Hoover is actually famous for this. Noodle authors in general are famous for this. I don't get the point. She might as well have just done a Maybe Someday or Ugly Love situation where there's the male and female narration in one book, because I actually love those books and it'd be a heck of a lot easier and better and not time consuming. I like the insight, but I don't want the whole story with the same dialogue all over again. The most common example I can think of, because, you know, everyone's heard about it, whether they'd like to or not, and it's unavoidable, is Grey. Who needs 50 Shades of Grey again in a companion novel? Just why? Please, publishers, explain. A lot of times for me, it'll depend on the genre, whether it's contemporary or fantasy, as well as where I stand with the series, whether it's my most anticipated of the year, and in that case, I want to curb my expectations and go into it like I would a normal book. There's also the gap factor with how fresh the story is in your mind. And of course, we can't forget about your investment in the story, in the characters, in the world, whether you've grown up with it or whether you just started the series yesterday. And that is basically the thing, whether it's a sequel or not, that will decide if you read the book. My final advice to you is read at your own risk and don't generalize. Every book, just like people, are all individual. You have different backstories, different situations, different places in where you are in your life reading these novels, and reading should just be an enjoyable thing. And if you're deliberating about reading a sequel, just ask yourself why. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Keep calm, read on, and I'll see you in a video soon. Goodbye! If you like this discussion, give the video a big thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more like it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. All my social media is around my face at SLSBooks, and my previous videos are down below me.